Hello, everyone. Along today, we're going to get right into it. This is a half-hour session. We're going to do 20 minutes of briefing, followed by 10 minutes of questions. If you've got questions at any stage, just pop them in the chat. We're going to be collecting those and we'll answer them at the end. Right. So we held a reality check webinar last month, the shift from chat to agents. And I just want to touch, this is the big shift that started really in November last year, moving from assistants or term-based AI to agents, AI tools and systems that do things for you. That change is happening. It's continuing to 6 weeks since we last talked. And it's stepping up a gear again because of and related to Claude Mythos. So just a reminder there, we're talking about AI agents and the shift over to AI agents and how Claude Mythos and similar models are showing us how there is going to be a very, very different phase of working with AI. The stakes here are extremely high. And that's why we're holding another of these AI reality check webinars. We want to explain what's actually happening with Claude Mythos. A lot of the commentary and news around it has been about cybersecurity. That's very concerning. It's very scary, but there are other implications as well. Perhaps not just scary, perhaps a little bit exciting as well. Either way, it's important to know exactly what is going on. So what happened? There's two bits of jargony words that we need to understand here. Claude Mythos Preview is the latest and possibly most powerful large language models AI system that has been produced by Anthropic. They have not released it, and that's on purpose. It's an incredible thing to do during what is essentially a massive competitive race to build the best AI systems out there. Instead, it's given it to a coalition that it formed of other tech companies, many of them competitors, to help defend against the misuse of the model. So essentially, people using Claude Mythos to mount cyber attacks, to hack systems. And this was seen as a real existential danger by Anthropic after they'd done a lot of testing. So they've held it back. All of these companies now have access to it. So do a number of banks, regulators. And there was a bit of a news story last week about people actually hacking in and getting access or getting unauthorized access to Claude Mythos itself as well. How much better is it than, say, Claude 4.7, which we now have access to, and ChatGPT 4.5? It's, well, you know that when models change, it's hard to tell at first what the differences are, but essentially it is about 5 times more powerful on most of the metrics that are out there. And we'll show some practical implications of what that means. Now, the first bit of reality we need to deal with is, so you're talking about how impressively dangerous your technology is. Is this just marketing? Would you happen to have an IPO coming up in October? So this is obviously something that people have considered. Is Anthropic somehow hyping up its own model? Well, we don't think it is. We think that for a few reasons. Anthropic's quite detailed analysis of its own model, but also we've seen other organizations that have been able to analyze it and what they've seen in it. So I'm sure it does help the perception of Anthropic and its Claude models in some regards, but the fact that they've held it back, the fact that they're releasing it to rivals is likely more motivated by genuine concern for safety, which is the core mission of Anthropic as an organization. But there are implications beyond it as a system that people can use. So imagine if Claude Mythos was out today. What it would mean would be that it would be a lot easier for people to hack into systems, to break security. And that's everything from, national infrastructure through to banks, small companies, personal people, whatever. That's been these AI models are already good for that. They're already good at helping and knowledge work, and that includes crime. But the shockwaves from Claude Mythos are quite extraordinary. And I think it's important to give a sense of perspective. So I bet this is the only presentation, unless you work in finance, the only presentation you'll see this week that's quoting Philippe Champagne, of the best name in global finance politics. He is the finance minister, essentially the chancellor of the exchequer, as it were, for Canada. And he said that the Strait of Hormuz, we know where it is. Anthropic is the unknown unknown. And he was speaking just 10 days ago or so, specifically about Claude Mythos. And he was talking about it as a risk to the financial system and a risk to the economy because of those security concerns. So that's a kind of a sense of it. When talking to friends and colleagues in the IT sector or who are kind of deep in their own creative work, it's been, but is this really a big fuss? I mean, yes, central banks are meeting about this. Governments are meeting about this. It's a very, very important issue. So great. Okay. It's very big. It's very, very scary. What does it mean beyond that? Well, I've got one news story as well to brief you on, which just emerged yesterday, which is related to this and related to AI agents and how powerful AI agents are becoming. And that was China has blocked the acquisition by Meta of an AI firm called Manus. Manus is a tool which we very much use and have enjoyed at Brilliant Noise. It's one of my favorites. It's kind of a few steps ahead of Claude and predicting some of the things that Claude was doing. It's a very powerful agent harness. So something that allows you to take AI systems and do quite complex tasks. And Meta had bought Manus for 2 billion. It was originally founded in China, but then it was moved to Singapore. And this was seen as a new model for how Chinese companies could realize some value in the international markets, was by changing territories to Singapore. This was a deal that was done. People from Manus had moved into the Meta offices in Singapore and San Francisco. People had been paid. Venture capitalists had paid out bonuses on this, but it's not happening. China said no. And the significance of that is China is seeing this as an issue of national security. These models, these agent models that we're all wondering about how to use in our business, are also being looked at by governments and seen as things that could be weaponized, things that could give too much advantage to a foreign economy or foreign government. So absolutely incredible development there. Coming back to Claude Mythos, this is really, really interesting. So this is our independent point of view on Mythos. So the AI Security Institute is the UK government's cybersecurity around AI institute. It looks exclusively at, it was called the AI Safety Institute, now called AI Security Institute, but it looked exclusively at what are the threats to the UK from AI models. And its tests of Claude Mythos found that it was the first model that could complete a simulated cyber attack test, that it had 37 steps, and no other models come close to that yet. So yes, than the models that we're all using at the moment. But as I said, there are implications beyond security. And we're not selling security. We're trying to talk plain common sense about what's going on here with these models and what it means for businesses. We need to bring us back to what it means for us in whatever organization we're in. Reading through the detail of the reports which we've done that are really, really interesting. The people who test these systems say that there's a 6 to 18 month window until all other competitors catch up with the capabilities of Claude Mythos. So it's been held back. It's being examined. People are patching security vulnerabilities, but there is a very short amount of time before all the other AI companies will also have similar models. And also open source versions will be available. That means, and there are many of these coming out of China, but Meta also has one as well. These are models which anyone can download and put on their own servers and do things with, that will be as powerful as Claude Mythos. And most importantly of all, if we stop thinking about security and think about the other implications for a moment, it's a real acceleration in the capabilities of agents and what they can do, because the complexity of what it had to do to beat some of these security systems can also be applied to any other operating model, any other process in a business, anything else we're doing. Many of us still are at the point where we're quite glad that many colleagues are experimenting with agents, or we've managed to get Copilot licenses for everybody. It's not enough. That's a previous phase of AI, which is already passing into kind of, that's table stakes literacy, understanding agents, and understanding the new reality. And I'm going to spend the next few slides explaining why that is, how quickly it's moving, and what we can do about it. So I've said that 6 to 18 month window that they're looking at for competitors and everybody to catch up, we could also look at for ourselves as the kind of amount of time we've got to prepare for transformation of our organizations that will be made possible by. This is a kind of compressed time and view of the last 3-4 years since ChatGPT came out. Along the bottom, what we've got is the thresholds that were passed over time. And these were First of all, in late 2022, we were all very surprised that AI could write an essay, an A-level essay or an undergraduate essay at a fairly good level. Now, of course, we've all been like, oh, no, it's got too many M dashes. But at the time, it was like, oh, wow, that's not something we expected, that it could write coherently. It was only the next year that it was kind of at the level where it was able to do research in a kind of a PhD level by many benchmarks. And then last November, and around Christmas time, as we were talking about in the last reality check webinar, we passed a threshold of like, it could code. It can code better than humans. And now, as of this month, it can hack better than humans. It can break through security systems. So where we are today is we're passing a threshold, but we haven't felt it yet, of systems being able to do really complex tasks that most humans can't do autonomously, or taking a brief and going and doing that. So we think we've got kind of an 18-month window there. So that's one way of looking at it. This is the more complex view, and you'll excuse me, I will send this round to everybody, but we constructed this because we were trying to build a map of what's happened. And I'm going to zoom in on some of this, but like that's the point which we get ChatGPT 3.5, 3.5 Turbo. I think actually that's, so 3.5 Turbo, that's actually a bit wrong there. It's coming up just a bit into 2022, we get ChatGPT. This is us now. We get the Claude Code launch at the beginning of 2025. Interestingly, a lot of people talking about when AGI has been achieved. There was a Nature article, which, as they say on the social media of clickbait, I can't believe more people aren't talking about. But a bunch of scientists and philosophers and computer scientists said that AGI was probably achieved last March in 2025. That came out this March. We've got the agentic coding threshold, where, as Boris Cherny, head of Claude Code, said, and we talked about last time, coding's been largely solved. That was in February, he said that. And then we've got Claude Mythos preview and Glasswing coming out here. We're kind of like plotting this as the Mythos-class models are going to begin arriving now through the next 18 months. So this clear triangle is our estimate of when we'll kind of have a moment like we did with coding, but at systems of agents. If you're a nerd, you call them swarms, but what we mean is agents that can talk to each other, organize, run whole complex processes. That's going to happen now in the next 18 months. So that's the complex model. The blue line here, that's from a lab in Silicon Valley, very respected, called Meta, METR. And it's basically showing that the length of the complexity of tasks that AI systems can complete has been doubling every 7 months since 2022. And I won't go into detail because it's a little bit complex to explain, but this is kind of the Moore's law of AI. It seems to be inevitable at the moment. It seems to be always following this curve. And as you can see, that curve then is sharpening. So we're reaching the point where it begins the kind of exponential growth. And as they say in the clickbait articles, we're not ready for this, but we're not. And practically we're not in organizations. So we need to talk about it. We need to come back from the hype and go, yeah, but what do we do about it? And we need to have a board level conversation. This is not an innovation conversation. This is not an L&D conversation. Board framework, corrections. There are market corrections happening. There are going to be competitive threats. There are going to be people getting hold of these systems and doing things with them. If we're all just learning how to prompt with ChatGPT, we are too far behind. We need to be much higher up the literacy curve. We are tinkering. And I think that this is an anatomy of some organizations that we've heard about. We can't really work with them, but people who are just terrified at the top and looking for security. And that usually looks like opting for Copilot licenses across the organization, confused in the middle because what we're allowed to do, what we should do. And people are being either unbothered or hostile at the edges in tinkering culture. We need to move from tinkering cultures into transformational cultures. Things are moving too fast now. So we need people who are already moving into the stage where it's like, no, this is transformational. We have a board case for this. We need to change the rules of how we work. We need to redesign how we work, and we need to do it at pace. Around this is to develop systems, make a business case, maybe share this video, or we've prepared a board report as well, which you can adapt it to your own board, but it includes the timeline and it includes all of the evidence that we've gathered so far that this is a huge shift that's happening now, and the boards need to take action in order to avoid the worst of market corrections, avoid losing competitive advantage. And I think as well, what we'd say is, because this is now a systems level kind of change, this can be very overwhelming for individuals. But when you read about systems and when you study systems thinking, what you can discover is that people within teams, within organizations, can make big change to systems just by starting to do things that yourselves, starting to do things differently. So the things that you can do that are positive right now are to develop your knowledge of and the systems that you're using within your own organization, making the business case, making the hard business case to boards, and either sharing this video or the report with whoever it is that you think needs to listen within your organization. But that's it. That's it for the briefing. I hope that what we've tried to do there is explain that Claude Mythos, I suppose what we were talking about in the last webinar was that we had seen a change happen between November and February, and that was reflected in the markets in that $2 trillion market cap loss in software companies. We can see the evidence of that change. The weird thing at the moment is that because of Claude Mythos being held back and what we know about that model, we can actually see the next change coming for the first time. So we're sounding the code red. We're sounding the alarm that this is and we'll share as much as we can about things that organizations should do and that you can get on with yourself. But, take our readiness audit, read our newsletter, email us if you would like a copy of the board briefing pack that we're making available today. It's something that we've put a Creative Commons license on it. So you're perfectly welcome to remix it and do it yourself. Just say, I borrowed some stuff from these guys. You don't have to brand it in our style or anything. But there's a business case there. There's a reason that boards need to move from tinkering to proper transformation and to do it right now. Okay, so that was the briefing. I'm going to open up to questions now.
We have a question from Ben, who's on the call, and I also have some questions from some lovely people who couldn't make it this morning. So Ben's question first, which is, have any regulators in the UK had access to Mythos?
Yes, they have. So the FCA, and I'm sorry because finance isn't my specialist sector, but I think it's the FCA. Bank of England have commented on it, and the FCA were meeting about it, I think around about the same time that the Canadian finance minister was talking about it as well. And that's a very good point, actually, because that leads me to a point which I didn't really have time to make in this call, that for boards, there's competition, but there's also the compliance thing that is going to be coming down the road very, very quickly. FCA is in the UK is great because it has, I actually saw someone from there talking a couple of months ago. They have sandboxes where they test AI tools and how people are working with AI. They're very positive about bringing people in and innovating with them. So they're quite a forward-looking regulator, but they will be looking to put out, my prediction is, and you would expect that they will put out stronger guidance on what you need to be doing, not just in terms of cybersecurity, but in terms of AI literacy. There's also the AI Act coming into force in August, which brings more burdens on. I know we're not in the EU and the UK, but we certainly need to be aware of and compliant with those laws. So AI literacy preparedness, you can see that is, I think, now a moral responsibility of organizations for their staff and their shareholders and all of their stakeholders. But it will be coming down the line quickly in terms of compliance. Not only should we prepare for, we've got an opportunity at the moment to influence that. I know that organizations like the FCA and whatever regulators are in your own industry, if you're in other industries, are going to be open to conversations at the moment because they'll be having the same sorts of meetings and trying to figure out what compliance, what regulation looks like.
I'm going to share a question that client Sarah actually keen to experiment and learn with AI rather than leaving it to a few enthusiasts.
Yeah, experiment and learn. So I've talked a lot about urgency here. What you can change is the speed of sharing and learning within your team and within wider teams. It's something we've talked about many times, and it's what we do at Brilliant Noise, which is weekly show and tell sessions where people are spending, each member of a team between 8 and 10 people will share with each other things that they've done with AI that week. And what we find with that is that it just spreads knowledge faster, it sparks innovation, and it helps set a level of language and understanding in the team. So people who've gone quite far ahead with experimenting are reminded of where others are and how to translate things back. And people who are just coming up and developing their literacy and their ability to speed up or improve their quality of work are able to learn from them. So I think that's probably the most important thing, is literally socializing it and doing that in a structured, friendly, open way. You see all sorts of things like people doing knowledge bases, dedicated channels on Slack, etc. Brilliant. All of them brilliant. But you need to be approaching it you need to be doing everything possible and making it as easy as possible and as useful as possible for people to do that. Good news is we do that at Brilliant Noise, and it's incredibly enjoyable and the highlight of every week.
It is indeed. Okay, we have a few more questions from in the room. Thank you, Alexander. He's said, AI literacy needs to be baked into the national curriculum. Do you agree?
Yes. 1,000 times yes. And there's, unfortunately, this is an area where, you hope things speed up, but it will move more slowly. A great model for that is Estonia, which was one of the first countries to have a digital literacy or a digital literacy based curriculum from the 90s onwards. No coincidence that it now has 7 unicorns per million people of the population, as opposed to one per million of the population in the UK. They are extremely advanced, and they've brought out an AI-based curriculum now as well. What they learned while they were doing that, they did it straight away after ChatGPT came out. They started the process of that and they rolled it out in August 2025. One of the things that experts put into that was to focus on higher order thinking skills. So, basically you've got like evaluation, creativity, synthesis, those sorts of things at the higher level. We've got the kind of the learning, explaining, application, our lower level thinking skills. And so they're kind of pushing their curriculum to focus on the things that will be more valuable for longer with AI in the world. But absolutely, it should be part of our curriculum. There's a template there. I really hope that someone in government's looking at it.
Thank you. So Jason has said, great talk, Antony. We manage Gov websites. I worry the open source versions of Mythos will be out faster on the dark web than regulators will be able to provide it to partners like us.
Yeah, I think that's a real concern. The good news is the AISI are ringing the alarm bells. The evidence is there and the policy imperative is there. I share your worry. And I mean, one thing that I think we're just on the cybersecurity side of things, one thing that we know is that all kinds of cyber attacks and online crime are increasing, and they will increase with the development of models, which is why we need as many people as literate as possible to be working out defenses and also taking personal and corporate security seriously. But then the balance there as well is not taking it so seriously that you're not able to use any tool at all. That's one of the excuses for a lack of innovation and learning and literacy in organizations is, well, we can only use tool X or we can only use that. And there's no, I think if FCA can get this right and have sandboxes and ways of experimenting, even as a regulator, I think the rest of us should be able to do that. I also think that a kind of a sector to look at for hope, even within like government, obviously there's a lot of rules, a lot of regulation, a lot of policy that we need to adhere to. But one of the surprises I learned about yesterday from colleagues in the British Interactive Media Association, we had a roundtable event, was that companies in the pharma sector are streaking ahead on their use of AI in communications and operations. And that's a real surprise. We come from a marketing background originally, and pharma was always the most cautious in any kind of digital marketing. But partly because they're so well structured and they have their policies and their systems written down, I suspect that may be one of the reasons that they're able to move faster, because those things become data that they can develop systems around and deploy quite quickly. I think you're right to be nervous, but also look around for reasons to be optimistic and things that we can use to speed up our own defense and our own innovation as well, to take advantage of the opportunities.
Okay, we're just going to try and squeeze in one more final question. It's actually a nice segue. Marina just said that's exactly where we're at, as in not wanting to restrict, being experimental, but worried about vulnerability. And our question is, what are the biggest risks to teams who are getting active with building and strategizing, but maybe aren't aware of where we could be making ourselves vulnerable? Have a very competent team who are well literate, but a big skills gap around risk and governance. What do you suggest?
Oh, wow. Wow. And so I think this is the bit where I have to say I'm not a security expert. So I would defer to colleagues from that industry. What I can talk about is the risk in not just the kind of regulation and the security measures, but I think the social side of it, the communication within teams. I mentioned the show and tell as an absolute cultural center point for us. But the other thing is everybody developing their own systems and own knowledge and not coming together and figuring out how it all works well together. So I think that can be a risk. I think the other unacknowledged risk is the risk to mental and emotional health. That's not something that we're always looking at the machines and the processes. Even when you're working really, really well with AI, it can, because you're working so much faster, but you can push yourself harder. So you do. I think all of those things need to be taken into account as well. So in terms of the security risk, I would defer to security colleagues, but I would also look at the risks across the organization in the same way as you would look at the opportunities to innovate across the organization as well. I hope that's useful, Marina. I know that you're in AI robotics.
Marina said it was very useful, and thank you. That's all we've got time for on the questions front.
Great. Thank you everyone for coming along. We keep these short, we keep these sweet. Hopefully we've communicated that we have a sense of urgency and a sense of mission around this, about helping organizations change. Lastly, I'd give you from a computer scientist that I follow on social media, and she said that the really important thing to understand about artificial intelligence at the moment is that it's getting faster at getting faster at getting faster. There's recurrence loops at the moment. So it really is a time to sit up and take attention and urgent action. Thank you.